a mountain bike trail, and a Walmart bike. This is my second go at the Huffy Dakari, Huffy's entry-level modern Walmart mountain bike. I have a full review that covers the Dakari front to back, a link to that down in the description, as well as the link to this bike on Walmart's website if you want to check it out there. For those of you that haven't seen that or just won't click the link, let me give you a quick 30-second rundown on the Dakari and what makes it a modern Walmart mountain bike. Features that include wide and more beefy mountain bike handlebars, a trigger shifter, in this case a Shimano Altus, disc brakes. The Dakari steps it up with hydraulic disc brakes, front and rear. The fork, what I consider to be the minimal acceptable level for a mountain bike, an SR Sun Tour. Drivetrain, that's a 1x. The derailleur matches the shifter. It's a Shimano Altus, and there's a 9-speed cassette, so this is a free-hub equipped bike. The wheels themselves, double wall alloy in 27.5, my favorite size. All that's bolted to a 60/61 aluminum frame with internal cable routing, nice welds, and Huffy got crafty because this frame, it's small. 15.25 inches, you pair that with 27.5 wheels, and typically someone 5'10" like myself wouldn't fit well on this, but somehow this Dakari, it fits me fine. To make this happen, Huffy equipped the bike with long crank arms, slide geometry, and a long seat post. And that results in some interesting outcomes because I can fit on this bike, but as I mentioned in my review, those long crank arms, they cause the bike to have very little pedal to ground clearance. The end result means pedal strikes, often, and pedal strikes in places on the trail that I've never had pedal strikes or scrapes before. A major deal on a bike that's priced at almost $600, and especially true when that bike is aimed at new riders, possibly on the trail for the first time. I was very unimpressed in my review, and that has persisted, but I own the bike, so I started thinking, can I make this better? I'm not talking about my usual upgrades. I mean, for $600, the bike should work out of the box. For me, it doesn't, and as I mentioned, I already own it, so what can I do to make it work? Well, how about I get rid of those 175mm crank arms? They're too long, so I'm going to go with something different, and I'm going to swap the pedals. I don't count this against the bike because some expensive bikes don't even come with pedals. So I dug into my pedal stash and I pulled these out. Bontrager's version of Race Face Chesters. They're good pedals and they're orange, which at first I thought would match the bike's trim. Once on the bike, I found out that trim, it's actually kind of a rose color. Definitely not orange, but color blend aside, these will give me the sure-footedness that I need for trail riding. Those are bolted to the reel change, the biggest part of this experiment, getting rid of those 175mm crank arms. I'm using these. This crankset from Snafu. It's part of a hyper bike that you'll be seeing soon. The important thing about these, 170mm. The size I think this bike should have been equipped with from the factory for proper pedal to ground clearance. So new pedals, new crankset, everything else about this bike, bone stock, complete factory. The only thing left to do is find out if this works and makes the Huffy Dakari the bike that I think it should have been out of the box. So does it work? Well, that's complicated, kind of like a relationship, because there is a relationship here. With that in mind, the good side, the yes side of the relationship, no more pedal strikes. I took this on the exact same path I took it in my original video, including the climb up, and these routes you're seeing, I was getting slight scrapes over even these small routes on my way up. Mentioned it in the review video. And there were some routes that kind of stood out in my mind, like the one I'm about to roll over, and I made sure I was on a downstroke when I went over this. You'll see, I get off the bike, I'm going to show you I can roll over this now, and this is how pedal clearance should work. This shouldn't drag, and it doesn't. Now there is one other byproduct of the change that I made. Because I used a crankset that I just had laying around, it has a 32-tooth chainring. That's 2 more than the factory chainring on this bike. So that changes the gearing ever so slightly. So a little more tiring when I'm on places like this, where I'm pedaling uphill, but also it does increase the top speed ever so slightly, just a little bit faster. So if a little faster on the top end is your thing, there you go, I accomplished that without even trying. All that was good stuff, but I said this was a relationship and there's a trade-off here for the success that is gained, because as I mentioned, this is a small frame, a 15.25-inch frame. Well, remember, I said Huffy used a hat trick to fit a 5'10" framed guy on this bike, a bike that's normally for shorter people. Well, when I take the crank arms away, that 175, take that down to 170, it turns out that makes it fit me not so much. Because I said before, this was right at my threshold, Well, now it's right under my threshold. And I've slightly exaggerated the effect here by having the seat forward a bit, but I want to show you just kind of what it feels like to me. Feels like my knees are going up to my wrist. And I think this shot perfectly conveys that. It looks cramped and I feel cramped. Along with this, there's something else that happened somewhere in here, and I would have thought the GoPro mic would have picked it up, but it didn't. I started hearing an odd click sound. A quick investigation and I found the source of the problem. The seat post head to seat post union is coming loose. And full disclosure here, as much as I've worked on bikes and upgraded bikes, I've never, that I can recall, had this happen. I don't even know how this union goes together, if it's a press fit or if it's bolted somehow through the bottom of the seat post. My takeaway from this is that it's not a good sign for quality control from Huffy. Okay, back on track, back to the complicated relationship. 170mm crank arms do make this bike work as it should, but they also do affect fitment for people like me that are 5'10". Here's the thing though, this is a 15¼ inch frame bike. I shouldn't fit on this well. I mean, could have used this in a pinch, yeah, but it's not a proper fit, and we know long term that can create problems. And I think Huffy has created their own problems by trying to stretch it out, make it work for riders that it shouldn't work for. And yes, I can correct that, but when you're spending $600 for a bike, $598 at the time of this video. At that price, I shouldn't have to put a brand new crankset on a brand new bike just to be able to ride it on the trail. And remember, even if I were a shorter rider, those long crank arms, they're still going to create pedal strikes the way it came out of the box. And I can't help but wonder if they ever even tested this bike, because I don't see how if you rode it on anything other than maybe a factory flat floor, how this wouldn't show up. And it's a shame. It's very much unfortunate, because there's so much good about this bike. Component-wise, it's very fair for the money. $598, hydraulic disc brakes, and they didn't even take some of the shortcuts that you usually see on big box bikes. And I keep saying they were trying to stretch this bike out to fit a wider range of riders. That's my opinion, and it could have been that they were just trying to use the same crank arms on the Amara and the Dakari. And the end result just happened to be this, and it somehow never got tested. Well, there's a thing I do here at KevCentral. I scale bikes, my expectations for bikes, based on cost. And for $598, I mean, that's getting to entry-level local bike shop prices. I at the very least expect not to be let down, or have safety concerns with how a bike rides in its factory configuration. Let me cap my experiment off with this observation, or this statement. If you have a Dakari, or maybe you've been gifted a Dakari because it is gifting season, my suggestion would be to immediately swap the crankset out for a crankset with 170mm crank arms. For me, that's all it needs to be rideable on green mountain bike trails and for riders that fit on a 15¼ inch frame. No stretching it to try to make it be something it is not. But what it is a fairly equipped bike with hydraulic disc brakes, and it's a looker. Meaning it doesn't look like a cheap Walmart bike. It looks like a local bike shop bike that just happens to have the Huffy name. So there's my take, my Dakari experiment. Comment below with what you think. Can't wait to hear what you're thinking about what I've done and how all this works out and what it all means. Because this is a bike in uncharted territory, meaning we're not having to swap out some of the components we usually swap out, but also at the same time having to swap out a component that we shouldn't have to. Anyway, comment below. Thanks for watching KevCentral. Have a great day.